Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our November Grimsby Historical Society. Off to a great start already. The Grimsby Heritage Advisory Committee meeting for November. It's great to be here, and let's get started. I will begin with our land acknowledgement. The Niagara region and Grimsby are situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Haudenosaunee, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The regional municipality of Niagara and Grimsby stands with all Indigenous peoples, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the land on which we live. Thank you. First up in our agenda today is approving the agenda. Oh no, first there is a disclosure of pecuniary interest. Thank you, everyone. I'm gonna get it one day. All right, next up we go to approving the agenda. Do I have a mover from the committee? Thank you, Councillor Costangi. All right, all in favor? Perfect. Resolved then that the November 14th, 2023 Heritage Advisory Committee agenda be approved. That's carried. Okay, next up we have the adoption of our previous minutes from October. A mover. Brian, thank you. Do I say that? Okay, all in favor? Thank you, wonderful. Resolved then that the Grimsby Heritage Advisory Committee minutes of October 10th, 2023 be received. Okay, and now we're up to some verbal updates. First, we have Bianca to give us an update on the National Trust Conference. Go ahead, Bianca.
Thank you. Through you, the chair. I just wanted to provide a quick update on the National Trust Conference. The conference took place on October 27th and 28th. The conference had great number of sessions, and some of the ones that really related to us here in Grimsby included the Heritage and Housing session, which talked about resolving the designation and density tensions. There was a session about rethinking material use and reuse, deconstruction, and embodied carbons, and how heritage can directly help lower some of those carbon emissions and help us move towards a sustainable future. And then we also had a great session about changing the narrative and commemorating Canada's diverse and complex history. Many of the discussions during the conference also spoke to the province bill of Bill 23 and how municipalities are responding to this bill. It referenced on the housing crisis, the importance of heritage preservation, and again, touched quite heavily on the importance of telling those complex stories that are not always easy to tell about Canada's diverse history. Overall, it was a great session, a great few sessions, and I felt like we really are front runners in the material that we're, including our designation reports and the conversations we're having at this table. I think it was really a great, when taking all that information, it was just a great reminder that we are on track and in line with a lot of the things that are being discussed across the province. So thank you.
That's really great, Bianca. Thank you for that update. It sounds like a really useful and inspiring conference. It's good to have those conversations across, that it's not just happening here, but across the country. So that's really awesome. Wonderful. Thank you. All right. So now that we've received that verbal update, do I have a mover for this? Okay. Yes. Amy. Okay. Resolved that the verbal update regarding the National Trust Conference be received. All in favor? Perfect. Thank you. Okay, next up, we have Bianca to give us an update on our designation plaques, and maybe there might be an opportunity to order in bulk.
Thank you, through you, the chair. So I just wanted to give an update to the committee that council did approve the text that we recommended for the designation plaques at the last heritage meeting. I did reach out to the manufacturer to see some options for us ordering in bulk. We haven't yet heard back on all of the available options, but I did also note that we wanted to order the 5 plaques to ensure that this year's budget is allocated for those plaques. And then I'm hoping to bring that quote back at the next committee meeting. And the slide just shows the ones that we recommended to council for approval. Thank you.
Okay, great. So these have been approved then by council, those names, and now we're just waiting to see. We place that order, and we'll be looking to see if we can get a bulk order in the future. Any questions from the committee regarding this? Okay, awesome. Oh, Bianca does have one other update.
Thank you, through the chair. I just wanted to address Brian's question from the last meeting. I did have it in my notes. He was just asking if there was any room in the budget for extra plaques, and I was able to review our budget, and a lot of the available funding went for notices for the designation, so there wasn't money left over for additional plaques. So I just wanted to give you that update as well.
That's great. Thank you for that update. Now that that update's been received, do I have a mover?
On November 8th, we did have a non-statutory public meeting here held at Town Hall at the request of the applicants for the development. They presented an overview of a revised plan on the parcel, on the property, and the recording of that meeting is available on the town's YouTube channel, and the applicant went over the proposal and showed some of the changes that were being proposed. And then I just wanted to also note that since the original application came out, both of the sites were designated under Part 4 of the Heritage Act, so heritage permits will be required. And it'll be through the heritage permit that we'll be able to really look at the details of the restoration of the building, make sure they're using appropriate mortars and things like that, so we can do that through the heritage permit process.
That's great, Bianca. Thank you. Any questions regarding the meeting last week that took place? Again, it is recorded and on YouTube if you want to take a look. It's interesting to see the evolution of the site and what they're proposing. I was at the meeting last week, and it was interesting to also hear, just opening up to the public, to the community, about what questions they had regarding the development. So I guess we'll see what happens. Thank you, Bianca, for that update. Do I have a mover for that to be received? Yes, Councilor Cristangi, thank you. Okay, resolved that the verbal update regarding the 19 Elm and 13 Mountain non-statutory meeting be received. All in favor? Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. All right, next up in our verbal updates is regarding working groups and a West Lincoln partnership. I'll move over to Bianca for that one.
Thank you, through the chair. So I wanted to start with the working group. So council did approve our minutes where we recommended that we enter into doing working groups with the committee. So the committee is now able to move forward with those working groups. And I know Sarah did have some comments she wanted to add about that, but I quickly wanted to touch on the West Lincoln partnership. So West Lincoln reached out to me asking for some support for heritage planning in general and the designations. So they had asked if we could have a joint heritage committee meeting where we could go over kind of heritage 101, heritage planning 101 and designations, and I thought it would be a good opportunity for networking, and I also thought the committee could help us with the presentation to the committee members in West Lincoln, and I think it's a really good opportunity to to build that relationship with them and protect the greater Niagara area. So I'm still working with the team in West Lincoln and our clerk's department to get a date, and then I'll circulate it to the committee. It'll likely be in the new year. Thank you.
I think that's really awesome. I like that, we're partnering with communities across West Niagara to share first our knowledge in this area, but also to empower the other communities to do this work too. So I think that's really cool. I'm looking forward for that as well. Any questions or comments from the committee before? No? Okay. I did, so for the working groups, I wanted to bring it to the committee if we think that for December's meeting about possibly going into closed session to have just a refresher about what we were hoping to accomplish research-wise for the working groups, and maybe have a little bit of training of what's involved in the working groups and what we want to do. And I wanted to just put that to the committee and see if we're okay for doing that for December's meeting. What do I do for that?
I don't know if we want to discuss it, and then we'll do a resolution.
Okay, so what do we think about that?
Just put it on the agenda.
Oh, if we just put it on the agenda?
I think we can just add it to the agenda next week. But you can.
Any comments or thoughts about that idea? Yeah.
Through you, Chair. Would this be replacing the regular agenda, or would we go through the regular agenda, conclude the meeting, have the meeting afterwards? I guess in practice, I have no issues with meeting there. I just kind of want to understand, is it going to be the full meeting plus this? Would this take place at the meeting? Just more kind of how we would handle that.
Through the chair, I think we would do regular business first and then go into closed session after as a part of the same meeting. And then we can meet and talk and then come back into open and close the meeting off. What I think would be, we definitely are going to need it for business. So yeah, unless the committee wanted to add another meeting in December, but I think based on the available days, I don't think that there's going to be very many options. So I think it's probably best to utilize that time after business.
That's a good question, Brian, and I'm glad. So I also agree that I think we have a lot we probably need to cover, so maybe if we just add it to the agenda at the end. I think that's probably the best use of our time, and that way we don't have to find a date that works for all of us to meet again for something that's closed. Okay, so maybe you could guide us through how best to do that.
Through the chair, I think what's best is I'll record in the minutes this recommendation, and then at the next meeting, I'll add it into the agenda and have the proper text. I'll work with clerks to make sure that it's a closed session for training.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So we don't need to do any resolutions now. Oh, we have a question. Thank you, Brian.
Through you, Chair. Just one more. As far as prep for that meeting, I remember it's probably going back a year and a half, 2 years, there was the plan that had a lot of the, I remember which document it was, but it was like a strategic plan. It had a lot of the functional things that the groups are working on, some of those. Is it possible to get that? I don't know if it's still a valid plan or if it's still in play, or maybe just as a reference point, maybe like a week or two before that, or if we can see kind of where things were, just as far as preparation and planning, so we're all ready to kind of act as far as like, rather than getting ourselves caught up in that meeting, we're all caught up going into that meeting. We're just more focused on further. I think it'll make a better use of the time because it's probably still going to be quite a bit to talk about.
Through the chair, definitely I can circulate some of the older documents we had, and maybe this is a good chance for us to update some of that stuff as well. And yeah, I think that works. Yeah.
I think that's a great idea, especially like as we're closing out the year and moving into a new year. It'd be kind of nice to see what we've done, what we're planning to do for next year, and then how our working groups can support those efforts. Awesome. Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions before we move on? Okay. All right. So now that that's been received, do I have a mover? Thank you, Brian. Resolved that the verbal update regarding working groups and the West Lincoln Heritage Training Partnership be received. All in favor? Perfect. That's great. Thank you. Okay, so next up in our report, we have a heritage permit application for 245 Main Street East. And we have Leah Wallace with us today, who prepared the impact assessment with us, our cultural heritage impact assessment with us today, to give us a presentation. So welcome, Leah. Thank you so much. And we'll start with the presentation first before we move forward with the rest of the reports. Go ahead, Leah.
Okay, through you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak tonight. I do believe that the owners, Mr. and Mrs. Van Pelt, are in the audience as well. So if there are any questions, we are all available to answer them. My name is Leah Wallace. As I said, I'm a registered professional planner specializing in heritage planning and a member of the Canadian Association of Heritage Professionals. I was retained by Mr. and Mrs. Van Pelt in March 2023 to complete a cultural heritage impact assessment for the property at 245 Main Street East, also known as the Beausoir House. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, the cultural heritage impact assessment was produced as a requirement for an application to sever a large residential lot on the east side of the property. And as you all know, the property is designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. It's surrounded by a modern subdivision developments, as you can see on the severance sketch, which was produced for the application. Have the next slide, please. So the document includes a description of the proposed development based on the severance sketch provided by the applicant, and a historical description of the development of Niagara and the town of Grimsby and the subject property, all the things that you would normally find in a heritage impact assessment. It also assessed the possible impacts on the cultural heritage resources on the property and the nearby designated and listed properties, and recommended conservation and proposed mitigation for identified built heritage resources and cultural heritage landscapes. So this map from Niagara Navigator identifies 2 other designated properties in the vicinity of the subject property and 3 listed properties as seen on this map. Some of those listed properties, I don't know if you've designated them yet. I know you have quite an active program moving forward, but at the time, this is the situation. The Heritage Impact Assessment also includes a discussion of the relevant planning documents. I won't go into them all, but they included the PPS, the present PPS, the Ontario Heritage Act, and your official plan and zoning bylaw. So can I have the next slide, please? Okay, this is, I don't know if you can read this, but it doesn't really matter because it's attached to your report. While the property is designated under Part 4, the designation bylaw was passed in 1986, and I think this was mentioned in the staff report. And I've never seen this before, but it doesn't contain any information regarding the history of a cultural heritage value or interest of the property. And no early designation bylaws frequently had very limited reference to the architecture or the history of a property, but at least they had some. So I'd never seen this before. And because of that, and because of the age of this designation bylaw, I completed a Regulation 569/22 analysis to ascertain if the property met criteria for designation, and it certainly did. It met at least 3 of those criteria. So that's just the designation bylaw there. Can I have slide 5, please? The next slide. Okay, then I had, of course, to analyze the impacts of the proposal on the subject property and the designated and listed properties that were nearby. And I used both the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places in Canada and the Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism info sheet number 5. So it's a large lot they're proposing in an area that will have the least impact on the existing structures and the landscape setting. And if the new dwelling is set well back, as indicated in the arborist report, the streetscape and the views and vistas will be conserved. All significant mature trees will be conserved and protected, and there will be no significant impacts on existing structures on the property. It also determined that the proposed size, location, and position of the building on the property will have minimal impact on existing structures and landscape settings identified in the statement of significance, and no impact on nearby designated and listed properties. So it seems that it's a good choice for a severance. Can I have the next slide, please? So as part of my impact assessment, I provide mitigation and recommendations for making the best use of the property when it is severed. I understand that a stage 1 and 2 archaeological survey has not been undertaken. I don't know if you require it. I don't know anything about how you handle archaeology in Grimsby. But if during excavation for the new house, deeply buried archaeological resources are uncovered, all construction should cease and an archaeological assessment should be completed before going forward with the building of a new house. Also, heritage permits and the approval of council are required for the consent and should be required for construction of the new house. And as part of the heritage permit approval, I suggested that you set the proposed house behind the facade of the existing home, develop an ongoing maintenance program for the existing house and the wonderful fruit barn, and any landscaping for the new lot should respect the overall character of the site, and it might consider a development of an interpretive plan for the property. I was concerned that board-on-board fencing should not be permitted along the western boundary of the new lot, and that natural screening should be used, though I think privacy fencing could be permitted in the rear. And there should be a landscape design. It doesn't have to be too formal, that should enhance the existing natural landscape and should obviously preserve the trees, the mature trees. And the designation bylaw should be amended to incorporate the statement of significance or interpretation of that and a list of heritage attributes as required under section 29.4 of the OHA. Grimsby Heritage Planning staff have recommended that these mitigation recommendations be integrated into the site and have also recommended an easement to ensure the new house, when constructed, is suitably designed and located on the new lot, and the significant cultural heritage resources on the site are protected before the designation bylaw is amended. And I think that's a pretty good approach. I would say that that's an excellent approach to protect the designation, the fact that the property is designated while the house is being constructed. But you really do need to amend that designation bylaw. So that's my presentation, and I can answer any questions if you like, and I'm sure Mr. and Mrs. Van Pelt would be able to do so also. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leah, for your great presentation and fantastic, thorough report. Any comments or questions from the committee? Yes, Councillor Del Flavio, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, my question is mostly the report mentions setbacks, and the setbacks are on Main Street are required based on neighboring properties. We already have policies. It's just in other severances, we've seen, you know, the severance comes through, and then a minor variance comes forward asking for a reduced setback so that they can, you know, so I'm not opposed to the plan. I just want to make sure that we can lock it in place and make sure that what we're actually approving is what we get in the end. if that makes sense, because we do these things based on good faith, and this has nothing to do with Mr. Van Pelt. I don't think are you going to be the one who's actually building the house? Okay, all right. Because my concern is that somebody comes along and says, oh, this could be 2 lots now, or this could be, it's not, we have other properties in town where we're dealing with them currently where, there was a heritage home and then people tried to turn it into a flag lot where you could put 2 more lots in front. This is a large, attractive property, and I want to make sure that if we approve this, that we get what we actually approved on this site. So is there any, I don't know if you can answer that or if
Thank you. Through the chair. So what we've done to try and gain as much control on this parcel is we're recommending to leave the designation in place so that a heritage permit has to come forward to actually construct the building. And then, like you said, they have to meet the zoning along Main Street, which is the average of 2 of the 2 adjacent parcels. And if they did ask for a minor variance, then at that point, we would go through that process and do the assessment of the impacts to the cultural heritage value. But tonight I've made it a condition of the heritage permit that it be in relative placement of the plan as the tree protection plan, Appendix D. But when the land is severed, eventually they're going to be building that new building and they need to meet the zoning. So can they apply for a variance? I believe they can. And we would deal with it at that point.
additional questions through you, Chair. So this would, and I'm sorry for not understanding completely what we're dealing with here. So this would have to still be subject to a severance application. Neighboring residents would still have to be notified for that severance application. People would have the opportunity to have input. I just want to make sure that, because there's a fear, you know, we got an email with concerns about the fact that there was not public notification about this, and that's assuming because it isn't, the public notification would be required if there was a severance or any other kind of legally required public notification. There's nothing really that's happening yet other than a heritage permit discussion. So can you clarify that and the process, please?
Through the chair, absolutely, yes. So because the Ontario Heritage Act says that the council of the municipality has to oversee the alterations to a heritage property in consultation with the Heritage Committee. Technically, when the severance occurs, they will be amending the lot fabric. So the designation applies to the whole parcel. And so because of that alteration, it has to come to Heritage Committee and then ultimately to council to say that the site can be altered from a heritage permit perspective. So that's why it's being done first. And we're also going to be able to provide information to the Land Division Committee so they can make this decision. But even if council did approve the heritage permit, they still have to go through the Land Division Committee, and the Land Division Committee can still turn it down. So it's going through the normal process. It's just we're ensuring that the Heritage Committee is able to provide comment to the Land Division Committee before it goes there. But circulation will go through the normal planning process in accordance with the Planning Act for the actual severance of the parcel.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I just wanted to make sure that I understood that correctly. I appreciate that. And when I look at the design, my first glance was that the lot was too narrow and that they could make it a wider lot. But now on second glance, I appreciate the fact that the land around the existing heritage home has been maximized to preserve it in as much of its original space as possible. I get that changes happen over time, and I know that not every large parcel of land can be preserved, but the way that this is being done where it's really only big enough to get one lot in, and hopefully we won't see somebody come back with a different application, although keeping the heritage designation on it makes me feel more comfortable about it as well. Just because you know what we've had in other parcels of land around town, and it's going to be an ongoing concern. Anytime we have a heritage home on a large parcel of land, we're going to have to deal with this. So I really like the way the land has been left on the east side of the property as well, even though they could have probably gone closer to the existing heritage home to make it a larger lot. I think it really does a good job in framing the house. So whatever goes in there will allow the existing home to remain in its sort of historic landscape as much as possible. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for Leah specifically? No, thank you so much for that. Okay, it looks like so thank you, Leah, again. And I think we'll move on to, Bianca has a report for us also, and then we can continue on the conversation once we have Bianca's report. That might answer some of our other questions as well.
Thank you. Through you, the chair. I just wanted to touch on, Leah was mentioning the archaeological assessment. So for the town of Grimsby, that is the responsibility of the Niagara region, and they have confirmed that an archaeological assessment is not required for the site, but as Leah noted, the ministry does have a requirement. If anything is found, all construction is to cease. And that was shared with the property owner during the pre-consultation, so. I'll now give my presentation. So a heritage permit was submitted for the property on October 11th, 2023. The application was deemed complete on November 1st. So the municipality must now approve the permit with conditions, or deny the permit within 90 days. If the 90 days elapse without us providing approval with conditions, or denying it, it will be automatically approved. Due to the importance of this decision, we've prioritized this to ensure that statutory timelines are met. So the heritage permit the recommendations made here tonight will go to Planning Committee on November 22nd, and then before Council on December 4th. And that's well within our statutory timelines. So the heritage permit submitted for the property includes a request to create a new lot with a frontage of 19.81 meters wide and a depth of 106 meters long, and that's going to be to the east of the heritage resource. The property owners have utilized the existing open space in the yard for the placement of the new structure, with the intention to preserve as much of the site's wooded character as possible. Staff recommend that when the new structure is built, that is located in the proximity of the proposed location within the tree protection plan, and that and staff further say that the placement of the new dwelling within this area will ensure that the wooded character of the site is not impacted, and further will facilitate the opportunity for the new modern layer to be introduced into the site, surrounded by mature vegetation, which will soften the introduction of that new layer. This will encourage the compatibility of the property and ease that contrast from the Main Street East corridor. Further, the proposed placement of the new dwelling behind the heritage building encourages the use of best practices and the standards and guidelines for historic places in Canada, and the requirement that modern layers be subordinate to adjacent cultural heritage. Finally, the placement of the proposed dwelling behind the heritage building ensures the preservation of important views from the public realm and preserves the heritage property's ability to contribute to the established character of Main Street. In summary, staff have reviewed the heritage permit application and recommend that the permit be conditionally approved. The conditions added to the permit will ensure the long-term preservation of the heritage property and the Main Street East corridor. By allowing our heritage sites to evolve, we facilitate opportunities for these resources to be conserved and appreciated with compatible, distinguishable, and subordinate interventions. I'll now go over the staff recommended conditions. So condition 1, that the existing designation bylaw under the Heritage Act for the property remain on title for both the existing and severed parcel until after the new structure has been constructed. 2, that the property owners of the new severed parcel obtain a heritage permit to construct the new building. 3, that the new construction be compatible, distinguishable, and subordinate to the heritage resource at 245 Main Street East. 4, that the recommendations within the heritage impact assessment be integrated into the new development. 5, that the new structure be set back behind the heritage property at 245 Main Street East, as proposed within the tree preservation plan, to ensure the preservation of views along Main Street East and to preserve the mature vegetation. And since my report, I actually added one more, which is that the tree protection hoarding that was shown within the tree protection plan be put on the mature vegetation during construction, to ensure that the vegetation is safe during when the new build is being built. We will have an opportunity to ask for that again when the actual heritage permit comes for the new building. But I did want to make sure that our intention were known both, that they echo each other. That's tree hoarding, which will protect the mature vegetation during the new construction. That following the construction of the new dwelling, a heritage easement under Section 37 of the Heritage Act be registered on title prior to amending the designation bylaw. This is being recommended because the designation bylaw is appealable. So we will put this easement in place when we go to remove the designation bylaw to amend it. And so there's still heritage protections on the site. And then once the appeal period is over for the bylaw, then we'll put the bylaw will be registered on title and we'll take the easement off the site. So it's a temporary protection. So that while the designation bylaw is being amended, a Schedule B be added to the bylaw. So as Leah had noted, there was no statement of significance or character defining elements paired with this bylaw. So we want one of those to be added and updated to ensure conformity with legislated criteria. And then that the easement agreement under Section 37 of the Heritage Act be removed following the 30-day designation bylaw appeal period. And so those are the conditions. And then staff further recommend that the comments from Heritage Committee, Planning Development, and the decision from Council be forwarded to the Land Division Committee to aid in their discussion regarding the consent, their discussion and decision regarding the consent of the property at 245 Main Street East. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Bianca. I think this is that's quite thorough, so I do appreciate that. And I do appreciate, again, all the work that Leah Wallace put into the Heritage Impact Assessment, and also the application from the homeowner as well. I agree with what Councillor DeFlavio said. I think, what's being proposed is being respectful to the current heritage property that is on site, and respectful to the designation and to the value of the property. So I really do appreciate that. Any comments or questions from the committee? Yes, Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Chair. So regarding the fruit barn, it's repeatedly mentioned. It's not part of the original designation, though?
Through the chair, it's the land that's designated. So technically all structures on the land are designated.
Because if Mr. Van Pelt wanted to restore that, I would vote in favor of using some of our restoration funds. It's a beautiful barn. I know that obviously there's a lot of structural stuff and things that go into that, but
I only put 100 grand into it.
Have you?
The back wall was disintegrated. I had to put new bracing in because the previous owners put a half pipe upstairs, cut joists, so I put that in for the simple reason that I.
Perfect. So, go back, I already put money into it, because the bottom line is it's a beautiful building, you're right. It's part of the character of the house. And as a result, people have toured my house, it's beautiful. We put a lot of money on it, and I'm going to answer your question too. The result is that we put money in because we wanted to save it. We did not want to kill kids next door, because if that happened, I couldn't live with myself, not for any kind of money. So it's not going to fall down. The roof is 40-year-old shingle on it now. It's not going to leak, and it's very dry because I store a lot of stuff in there. So as a result, it needs to be propped up in certain areas, particularly the front end of the wall. There are costs and there are different prices that are available, but we look at that. But at the same time, it costs a lot of money to maintain these places, as we all know. But we're open to that because it is part of the character of the house and the property, resulting in the fact that, look, when we went for the heritage, for the severance, we wanted to make sure we protected the property, because from a financial point of view, the best option for it is for me to build the house, so I have no capital gains on that sale. Consequently, everybody knows how well we maintain that house. We're not going to put a modern contraption beside it. We also put it there because for the fact that we are part of the community and people like looking at my house. I sit on the front porch. It's my favorite place. After a busy, stressful week of business, I like to sit on my front porch, have a few rum and cokes, and people look back at my house. Now, I'm a lucky guy because 45 years ago when I was a junior rep, I went by that place every year and I said, that's the luckiest person who owns that house. I own it now with my wife. So the result, there's not a hope in hell that we're going to do anything to change the mosaic of that view. Second of all, we're going to build it back because we want to maintain it. The best place to put it to protect those trees, and trust me, I rake those leaves, or I blow those leaves, is the fact in that square area, it sets back, maintains it, it keeps the integrity of the property, and maintains those 200- and 300-year-old trees. So the question is, what are we going to do? Most likely we're going to build. And we build, I'm not going to look for a variance, because my understanding from day one was I'm allowed one building on that lot. And that's all we want from a financial point of view, because who knows, in 5 years, I might not want that property if I build. But that property I'll sell for a reduced price, make money on the other one. I'm financially ahead. At the end of the day, I'm still maintaining what my belief is that we want to maintain that house. It's almost 200 years old. It's burned down 3 times, but it's 200 years old. At the end of the day, you walk in, John Allen did a fabulous job restoring it. They're good friends of ours. And the last thing is that if I ever damaged that house, my wife would put me in the barn permanently, probably in the basement. So the bottom line is, we love our property. We want to maintain control. I don't want a builder coming in and ripping the place up and doing whatever. We're going to do it respectfully. But at the same time, we also believe, as a part of the community, somewhere along the line, I have to have some control as well. And consequently, I'm doing everything right. And I want to make sure that maybe we set a benchmark on what other properties have, because when I look at the development across the road that's empty right now, 14 custom homes. Now we got a heritage house, a heritage house, and a heritage house. I hope the same standards are going to be applied to the builders that put those houses in on the main street, because I do not want another landmark that promised side view brick, not stucco. I signed off on that and it didn't happen. And I know landmark. Very terrible. Bottom line is, I don't want that happening, because you can't have a rule for me and a rule for somebody else. So that's what I look at. Because if I'm going to maintain beauty, I don't want steel and stone and concrete and flat roofs across the road. Not going to happen, because then I will appeal. So as a result, that's just my passion. And anybody that knows me, Bianca knows me well. She's been in my house. She knows what it looks like. Nothing's out of place. And that same care and respect is going to happen on that severed property, period. And that's probably why we're going to build there. That's all I got to say. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions for the homeowner here? Yes, Brian.
Through you, Chair. Thanks for speaking. That was quite helpful in answering a lot of the kind of background questions I had. One follow-up, and it's more just a clarity question there. Is the intent to retain ownership of that parcel of land, develop it yourself on there, but retain
Yeah,
ownership?
so, look, my wife's retired from, she still does special guests for our place, but she's done 25 years of B&B. I'm never going to retire because I love my job and I get paid a lot of money to do what I like to do. So, result, we still love it. So the plan is, as we still live there, get this property and parcel severed properly. Then, at the end of the day, if we decide to sell the property, that's where we are now, we can sell at a bit of a reduced rate because we don't have all the land. Go and live and rent, or if we have to, if we're out of the house, have that money and develop the house that we want to live in for whatever, because we own the land, so we can build a nice property, nice house for $800,000, trust me. I'm in the building materials business, so I know what it costs. And I know good builders. Consequently, we're not putting up crappy, we're going to put something that's going to balance it out. At the same time, I totally agree. We're not going to put fencing up along. That was one of our ideas. We want natural shrubbery along the side. Road going up, house set back, they still have a privacy in the back. They got a pool beside them, so there's not, and we don't have any kids, so the bottom line is it's going to be quite quiet back there. So the bottom line is, if I'm there for a couple more years, the benefit is I don't pay capital gains. Financially, I make some whole back. So the result is I become my own developer. Who thought, what a thunk, I sell these guys and now I'm going to be a developer, my God. But the end result is that's probably the plan. So as a result, financially makes sense. We love the community. I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. And we have options on what we want to do in our retirement. And who knows, I become a subcontractor or a contractor or whatever else in my semi-retirement. So hopefully that clarifies.
Thank you so much. I think Brian has had one other question.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Thanks for that response there. It's a general question. I don't know if you had a chance to review town council or the town planning's report there. Do you have any concerns with the conditions that have been listed in the report?
I don't. I think that, I totally understand that, look, if they find a bunch of Indian bones, well, that's one thing. I don't control that. Now, I had a hard press because there's been so much development around that because all that land was basically our land, or land before I owned it. So they never found anything, so I don't think they'll find anything then. The other thing is that, I don't have any concerns. I think the main thing is that once the property is developed, the new property shouldn't be designated, but the existing one will always be designated into eternity. That's fine. And the new owners that come into that will have two things. Number one is the new owners probably won't have to go through all the capital expenditures we had because there's really nothing left to do. They get a pretty good property, and if you're coming from Toronto, think about it. A $1.8 million house and it's a switch, and you're getting 6 times the property and a quality of life that you're not going to get in Toronto. So that's a good thing. And then you get a neighbor like me that's going to take care of his property for a while, until I'm too old to ride my tractor. But that's a whole different thing. But I don't have any concerns right now. I think that I like to see the process evolve. I think we've done everything right. We will do the drainage and the utility. I've talked to the survey company did the other stuff, so that'll be done once we get through this process, so that's done. And anything else that we have to do. So bottom line is that, for me, we're doing it the right way. If I would have come in here and said I want to do 6 buildings or 8 buildings and whatever else, yeah, we'd have a fight on our hand. That's not what we're trying. Our understanding from day one was one structure, and we haven't varied off that. I'd love to have 10 structures because some builder would probably buy it, and then you'd get your variances. But I don't have time for that.
Thank you for those questions, Brian, and thank you so much for coming up and answering our questions.
Yes. And thanks, Nick, for those things. I do appreciate what you had when you asked those questions, because I just wanted to answer that.
Through you, Chair, if I might, I think that you've done a great job preserving the home. My concern is if you sell the property, what comes next. So I want to make sure that we have, as a municipality, what we need to do to protect
get it.
the town. So I'm not concerned about what you're going to do. I'm concerned about if you sell the land, what the next person wants to do. And so I'm glad that we have what we need in place in
And I
order
think there's
to
a check and balance there, because financially, it's in my best interest that I
do it yourself.
do
Yeah.
it yourself.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, as I
Nice
make money-
bungalow there for you?
Pardon?
A nice bungalow for you there?
Well, I would like a bungalow. My wife is, it's funny, we started this process because we decided, well, maybe we'll sell and move further and closer to our kids. And of course, every house she decided that she wanted to look at was another Victorian that had 6 bedrooms. I said, Barb, I don't want 6 bedrooms. I just want an office and all on the main floor, big screen. And of course, I even said, can we just have white walls for a change? And that's off the table, because there's not a white wall in our house. Just telling you. So that's the process. But no, I do appreciate it. And the bottom line is, I think you have to also trust me in the fact that, look, I like living in Grimsby. It's been, both my wife and I love it here. And the bottom line is that you got some nice checks and balances that you probably can count on. That's all I got.
Well, thank you so much for coming up here and sharing, and again, for putting forward such a thoughtful and thorough application. Thank you. Okay, I do have some questions, more about the report itself, and Leah's noted it also in her assessment, that there isn't a statement of significance in the designation. So how do we go about putting that in?
Through the chair, so we'll actually have to amend the designation amend the designation bylaw, which is a process that comes through Heritage Committee and ultimately is approved by council. So Leah Wallace has prepared a statement of significance and some character defining elements within the Heritage Impact Assessment, and then we'll also review that and make any amendments that we feel should be added if needed. And then we'll bring that forward to the committee, and then you'll actually be a part of the process where we amend the bylaw. But that won't be until after the new house is built. So it'll be a little bit out, but that is a formal process through the Heritage Act, the amending of the bylaw.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. It really brought to mind like the importance of why we make these very thorough designation reports and these research reports when we go for designation, just to see that this house was designated, but not with the statement of significance. It's kind of that story's lost, like, formally, I guess. So it was kind of interesting for me to say, well, the whole community knows the importance of this house. But yeah, sorry, Mayor Jordan, go ahead.
I wanted you to finish first, Chair, but the statement of significance is really important, and the full story is really important, and certainly I know this isn't the only property that in my opinion has gaps in the history. So I think we really have to, as a committee, make sure that we can have as fulsome a history as possible in each designation. And I know it is a little tedious because we have to go back to council again if there is a correction, but I'd rather see history being correct rather than an incorrect version. And nothing drives me crazier than history that is not correct, and I know it's onerous sometimes to take the time to correct it, but I think it's in our best interest in this community to have everything the way it should be.
Yeah, I agree. We're working a little bit more proactively with these things. I don't know, Bianca, if you had something you wanted to say to that, or...
Through you, the chair, I was just going to note that, the easement is always an option that you can put in place to amend these bylaws, but the easement is an agreed-upon document between you and the property owner. So if we were to amend a designation bylaw, that's an existing designation right now, without that easement, there is a little vulnerability that comes from opening up the designation. It's not to say it can't be done, but I think if we had like some sites we had in mind and we worked towards those updated statements of significance, then we could put together a strategy to ensure there's no vulnerability when those are being amended. But otherwise, I agree. I think having strong statements of significance and thorough character defining elements helps us in the long run when we do have alterations coming on the site. So I think that is a project, the committee could work on.
I think I maybe add it to a future working group or project or something. Because again, I didn't realize that this was a gap that we might have had, and again, knowing that we have a homeowner who's willing to work with us on this and is really fantastic, but might not always be the case. So I think it's important, definitely in the future. But again, and also just recognizing wow, great work doing that work we're doing now for the designations that we're putting forward now. I think it is important to have those full stories that we're researching and to have a very thorough list of the character defining elements that we are putting in the reports now. So I think we're doing a good practice that we can continue for the future. So I also just wanted to note that as well. Any other comments or questions from the committee regarding this? I guess, Brian, go ahead.
Through you, Chair. It's kind of building off of the last line of question around the existing designation bylaw. Maybe ask this in two parts and give Bianca a chance to answer. This follow-up question I think might be important. If I heard correctly, the designation just applies to the entire plot of land and all structures on it. I see you nodding your head, so we'll move on from there. So for the next piece is, by opening up the designation bylaw and being able to identify and add the statements around this and clarify what should have been in there in the first place, if I remember correctly, most of these we then identify through the designation what applies, like the structures on that land. And if there's nothing on the other parcel of land, will anything actually be designated on that parcel of land, or will the designation not apply to? I guess the question is, what would it apply to on that plot of land if there's no structures on it? I mean, just the trees?
Through the chair, I think the most important thing for the empty parcel is that a heritage permit will be required to alter the site. So it's through that heritage permit that you can actually speak to the new construction of the building, and then also will be able to speak to the adjacent heritage property. That will be taken into consideration with the heritage permit. And then again, we can put in those conditions so that we make sure we get something that's compatible with the building. And we would like to have elevations at the time, so you can provide comment on any elevations. I think back to that site we worked on Main Street East, Main Street West, where they were building a new building next to a heritage site. And we talked quite a bit about how the porch they were proposing was very similar to the porch next door. And so we worked with the property owners to tweak that design to have a porch that was compatible but didn't mimic the heritage structure, so it still has its kind of presence on the street and isn't competing. So I think that's kind of what we'd like to do as well with this new building, is make sure nothing's competing with the Bowes Law House. So that really at that point, we're trying to use that heritage designation as a mechanism to add additional conditions into the site and really control what's being built there.
Through you, Chair. Functionally, can you talk through how the amendment will work? Will this was designated in 1986 as the laws were written in 1986. Is this simply opening it up, making the amendment, getting council to pass it, or is it opened up to, and now all of the laws and the timelines of present day apply? And is it basically a totally new designation, but for the fact that we have some history already on it?
So through the chair, there's two kind of steps in a designation bylaw. So there's one that's kind of like a clerical amendment where you're updating legal descriptions and things like that. where there's, I believe it's just circulation to the property owner, where if you're doing a more fulsome amendment, you have circulation within the general community, the property owner, and there's that appeal period at the end. And there's also legislative requirements now for what is included within a designation bylaw. So if we're going to be amending it, we have the easement in place which protects the property, then we might as well bring it up in full conformity. We'll likely do a full designation report to go with it so that we have a full document backing our new statement of significance and character defining elements in case it is an appealed in the future. But the easement really enables us to make sure that even if that appeal takes place, there's still protection on the site. And we'll review the heritage easement at the committee, and it really speaks to the level of stringency that easement puts in place. So say if it was appealed, we still have the heritage easement, which the heritage easement could be as stringent as the designation report, or it could be even more. So that's something we can look at that point. The plan here is that that's just temporary, then it's removed, the designation bylaw is put in place, and then it's removed off that new parcel, and then it's kind of finalized at that point. But yeah, it depends on how much we amend it, how the route it takes in the Heritage Act.
Thank you. Does that sound okay, Brian? Awesome. Thank you for asking those questions. Thank you for getting so technical with us also. This has been really informative and really helpful to see. Okay. Anything else? Wonderful. I think all my questions are answered. Thank you. And again, thank you to Leah for coming on to give our presentation, and for Ron coming to answer our questions. Thank you so, so much. I think we're ready.
Yeah, do you want to do this one?
I'll do Leah's.
And we'll receive the delegation, so do this one first.
Okay. Yeah. Everyone, I have a really, really long resolution coming. Okay, so first I get a mover, then I read it, and then I get it carried. Okay, so can I have a mover for this? Okay, Brian, yes, perfect, thank you. I have to read the whole thing, eh? Yeah? Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Do you want us to share it on the screen?
I mean, if you'd like, but I can, yeah, for people to follow along. Whew, okay, guys, we're just gonna go for it. Okay, that report to GH 2318 Heritage Permit Application 245 Main Street East proposed severance application be received, and that the committee recommends that the heritage permit be approved with the following conditions. That the existing designation bylaw under the Ontario Heritage Act for the heritage property remain on title for both the existing and severed parcel until after the new structure has been constructed, and that the property owners of the new severed parcel obtain a heritage permit to construct the new building, and that the new construction be compatible, distinguishable, and subornament to the cultural heritage resources at 245 Main Street East, and that the recommendations within the heritage impact assessment be integrated into the new development, and that the new structure be set back behind the heritage property at 245 Main Street East as proposed within the tree preservation plan, Appendix D, to ensure the preservation of views along Main Street East and the preservation of mature vegetation, and that the tree protection hoarding be used on the mature vegetation during construction as outlined within the approved tree protection plan, and that the following construction of the new dwelling, a heritage easement under Section 37 of the Ontario Heritage Act, be registered on title prior to amending the designation bylaw, and that while the designation bylaw is being amended, a Schedule B be added to the bylaw with a statement of significance and a list of character-defining elements, ensuring conformity with legislative criteria, and that the heritage easement under Section 37 of the Ontario Heritage Act be removed following the completion of the 30-day designation bylaw appeal period. that the recommendations and comments from the Heritage Committee, Planning Development Committee, and the decision from council be forwarded to the Land Division Committee to aid in their decision regarding the consent of the property at 245 Main Street East. All in favor? Oh, woohoo, that's great, guys. All right, awesome, thank you. And now I have another resolution for Leah Wallace. Can I have a mover for her presentation? Amy, wonderful. Okay. Then resolved that the delegation from Leah Wallace be received. All in favor? Fantastic, everyone. Thank you so much. Leah, thank you so much. If you're still there, you are welcome to be free and enjoy the rest of your evening. And thank you, Ron, also. Thank you again.
We have pictures of the Boslows in our dining room.
Oh my gosh.
We have Boslow silver.
Wow. I'm coming over for a visit. Thank you so much. Take care. All right, everyone. Thank you for that. Next up, we have a recommendation report for the new Bill 139. Bianca, take it away.
Thank you, through you, the chair. So on October 19th, 2023, the province introduced a new bill known as Bill 139, the Less Red Tape, More Common Sense Act. The proposed legislative changes were introduced as part of the province red tape reduction package, with the intention to update and modernize legislation to improve services to people, reduce costs for businesses, and make it easier to work with the government. The bill proposes to introduce various amendments to 20 statutes, including the Ontario Heritage Act. On October 26th, the province initiated its second reading of Bill 139. The bill has not been read at the time of this report. I would have to double check if it's been read a third time yet, but at the time the report had not been read a third time or received royal assent. Following royal assent, all the proposed legislative changes to the Heritage Act would require a proclamation date. So once it receives royal assent, the Lieutenant Governor will have to give a date when this is coming into effect. Right now, they have put a placeholder for January 1, 2024, but the date has not yet been proclaimed. So all those the changes being proposed would not come into effect until that date is proclaimed by the Lieutenant Governor. The amendments to the OHA are intended to allow religious groups and Indigenous communities to move forward with their proposed alterations more quickly when requirements under the Heritage Act have been met. Following the introduction of these changes, the province has provided the opportunity for consultation. This consultation period will be open until December 3rd on the Environmental Registry of Ontario website. The proposed legislative changes are intended to ensure religious groups and Indigenous communities can move forward. Sorry, I've repeated myself. So the intent of these alterations is to enable religious institutions and Indigenous communities to not have heritage protections impact their day-to-day operations. These amendments would facilitate the opportunity for the municipality to further support these important groups within our community. And these proposed amendments can be used to further strengthen our relationships with these organizations and the Indigenous communities. In summary, we're supportive of the proposed legislative changes and the opportunity they provide. In the past, we have heard from religious communities that sometimes they are afraid to enter into these protections under the Heritage Act because of the potential impact on their day-to-day operations. So this would enable us to protect these really important buildings, celebrate these buildings, tell these stories, but we're not impacting in any way their ability to worship or celebrate within these spaces. We think this is a good thing that will help us to better understand our community, better understand these communities, and celebrate these communities within our in our greater community. So in general, we were really supportive. I just wanted to touch on the questions that they prompted. So the first question was, is 30 days a sufficient time for municipalities to process applications and to determine if they are complete? We currently work within the 30-day timeline for deeming applications complete, so this will have no impact on our internal review process. The next question is, are there any further conditions that should be applied to these types of applications? We were supportive of the conditions included and felt they provided adequate opportunities to protect the heritage while enabling the continued practice of cultural and spiritual practices. I was going to also note that these alterations do not include additions. So these are alterations to designated attributes. And then the next question is the list of information and materials required as a part of the complete application sufficient? Are there any materials or information that is missing or should be removed? So we recommended that a condition be added to this portion of the legislation that would enable us to ensure best practices are followed, which is photo documentation. So our recommendation was that they add a condition that photo documentation of the original attributes to be submitted with the application, and that will enable us to ensure these attributes are properly recorded in the event that someone wanted to put one back in the future or restore an altered attribute. And I think it also provides an opportunity for us to better understand the community's new needs and why these things are changing. It just facilitates another opportunity for us to understand those communities better. The next question was, are there types of buildings listed considered by religious organizations to be reflective of what are commonly thought of or referred to as places of worship? Do Indigenous communities and organizations consider the definition as relative of buildings where their religious and spiritual Indigenous practices might take place? Are there modifications or additions to the definition that religious organizations, Indigenous communities, or Indigenous organizations would suggest? And we just noted that staff are supportive of the terms included based on the recognized structures within our community. So those are just some of my comments or staff comments on the questions, but I did have a resolution in here that we share this feedback with the government so they can include it as part of their community engagement. So these were some of my thoughts. I don't know if the committee wanted to add additional things, and then we'll do our best to streamline this to council to get it in before the December 3rd date so we can share it with the province. Thank you.
That's great, Bianca. Thank you for bringing this to our attention and doing so much thought and consideration about how this will impact us. Any comments or questions from the committee regarding Bill 139? Yes, Brian, go ahead.
Through you, Chair. Two questions. I think I probably should ask them separate. Just going to the report that you provided, Bianca, I think it's page 6. It says that sorry, I gotta go bounce between two reports here. So in your report, there we go. Yeah, page 6, I guess it would be the 4th paragraph down. It says, in past, religious institutions have often shared their concerns with OHA protections due to potential impacts on their day-to-day operations. Can you give some examples of that? Just maybe give some context for that one. I'm just more curious on that comment.
Thank you, through the chair. I wouldn't say it was like specific things. It's just in conversations I've had with them, they've just feared that the protections under the Heritage Act would impact their ability to continue to have the space be what they needed to be on a day-to-day basis. So they didn't want their religious rights basically to be impacted by the heritage protection. So I think this is a good balance where we're able to protect it but still respect what they need to do on those structures.
I was on Heritage for a long time, and every time we had a church that we talked about, the concern about the ability to expand the church. So when St. Andrews came up, they expressed their concerns. When the Ukrainian church on the mountain, it seems to have been an ongoing thing throughout for the last at least 20 years, in my experience, anytime one of these types of buildings, in school buildings too, before that used to be an issue. It's less so now. There's a feeling of the inability to change the building once, and they don't want any kind of restrictions put on them at all. I think we're past that now. I think people understand that the municipality wants to preserve these buildings and wants to work with the church owners, the school owners to do what we can to preserve those buildings. But there was a reluctance for a long time and a pushback from a long time. Every time we had a church property that came forward, there was always even for listing, not even for designation, even for listing those properties, we would get notes back saying, please don't include our church on the list, because there was a fear that they couldn't change. The accessory structures as well, because St. Andrews has 4 or 5 other buildings on the property as well. So all of that, there's a concern about being able to change any of that, I think, is the fear, because they are working buildings. So.
Thank you for providing that context. Brian, did you have another question?
Yes, thank you, through you, Chair. So just to the legislation itself, maybe more for Bianca, I guess, to comment on this one. Is it worth, so as I read the legislation right now, it basically says if they get a sworn affidavit, which have to accept at face value, no ifs, ands, or buts, it gets pushed forward. Is it worth, suggesting an amendment to this to say that, there is the ability for the town to independently verify for that, or maybe some way of, I guess if there's something that is of concern in one of those sworn affidavits, as I'm reading it now, it's basically like, too bad, you got to accept it at face value. I wonder if this is a good opportunity for us to say, the ability at the town's own expense to independently verify. Maybe there's some parameters around that so that it doesn't necessarily, get the groups upset about, hey, this is going to drag things out. It's totally killing the spirit of this. But I feel like that is an important piece that, you want to be able to at least take some steps to verify that, whether it's directly with the person that's signing that or perhaps an independent party that has similar knowledge of that topic.
Through the chair, I think that's a really good point. I'm thinking maybe, I'm thinking which question, I think maybe under, that was materials required, right? I believe that one. I have the bill here, hold on.
It's Article 25 there for greater certainty. It's reliance on the affidavit or sworn declaration is the heading on that. That was the one I was referring to.
Okay, so maybe are there further conditions that should be applied to these types of applications? We can add it into that one.
And I think it's also perhaps even amending that paragraph, because it says for greater certainty the council shall rely exclusively on the affidavit. So I think that in itself is limiting, even if you put the paragraph in suggesting that you have the ability to, the wording of that one suggests that you can't even do that. So I think it's amending that paragraph and adding a piece in about the ability to further clarify or independently verify.
I just want to confirm where he's heading.
It's this piece here.
Oh, that's actually in the bill.
Yeah, it's one of that actual legislation.
This one here, yeah, okay.
While you're looking for that, Bianca, Brian, just so you know, this legislation is not solving an issue that actually exists, right? Like this is a made up pretend thing. If anything, the preservation of heritage is something that every resident wants. And when you come forward with the perspective to developers that it's important to the town of Grimsby, and first and foremost, heritage needs to be preserved, they do what they need to do that, and then move on to making their money on the rest of the property. So this is a non-issue that the province is, it made up, maybe in other municipalities, I don't know, but I can tell you in Grimsby, anytime we came with a heritage first mindset, that became the mindset of the developer. You know, and when it wasn't, even the OLT would find it in favor. So this is legislation that is not solving any problem. This 30 days, 90 days, the timeline's not an issue. It's doing something that appears to make a change rather than actually making a change is what it does. It has no, other than making it more difficult on our planning staff, it doesn't really solve any problem.
Internally.
In my humble opinion.
I'm going to just say the municipality. So through the chair, I just had here, for greater certainty, the council shall rely on the affidavit or sworn declaration under paragraph 5 of subsection 18, demonstrate the application meets the conditions under paragraph 1 to 4 of subsequent, I guess, section 18, yeah. So then I just added here, and if required, the affidavit or sworn declaration be internally verified by the municipality at their own expense. Okay.
Okay, thank you for that addition. That was my general question, and I wasn't sure if anyone looked into this, but why this was coming up. That was my question, why this change, what prompted this change, I guess, if anyone had ideas.
Through the chair, I kind of have a hopeful thought that maybe with what's coming with Bill 23, they're seeing a lot of institutions that should be protected, and they're facilitating an opportunity for that to be a more joint kind of effort between both parties where they feel their rights are protected and the municipality can still protect it. I was kind of hopeful that's where it came from, but outside of that, I don't really know too much.
I like your hopeful spin on this. I briefly looked online and I couldn't really find much about what spurred this. So thank you. I'll go with that. I'll go with the positive spin. I also just wanted to confirm, so this is about alterations to the building, not additions to the building? And what examples might this be? What might this refer to? Okay. I just know that in Bianca's notes in her report, she mentioned something about specifically alterations and not additions. So I just wanted some some clarity around that.
Yeah, I'm just pulling that, sorry, through the chair, just pulling that up. That was one of the, yeah, so here, the conditions that the MCM is proposing is that the alteration is not permitted to be an addition to the building. So the alteration must be for the belief of an Indigenous community, Indigenous organization, or religious organization that is not an Indigenous organization where the religious organization is registered charity under the laws of Ontario. Yeah, prohibiting alterations that are an addition for the building would help to limit the potential to impact heritage attributes beyond these related to Indigenous practices. So that's what the MCM is saying, that the way because they've added in that condition, it allows them to not have as significant of an impact on the cultural heritage value. So additions would not be included as something, when it comes forward, if it's for an addition, then they need to go through the full heritage permit process. Okay. If it's for an attribute and it has to be directly related to their act of worshiping, and I'm speaking to the religious because I understand it, but some of the other groups, I don't fully understand what they're using these spaces for, so I don't want to, specialize, get too specific on that, but it would have to be directly related to their religious use of that building or spiritual use of that building, and it can't be an addition. It has to be only an attribute, and they have to explain why, basically.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. Thank you. Any other comments or questions regarding this?
So we're going to add in. And then everyone's okay with, sorry, through the chair, us adding in Brian's suggestion there for section 33 of the Ontario Heritage Act, subsection 25. And so I will add that to our answers to those questions.
I agree. I think this gives us a little bit more, control.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Do we need to add anything to the resolution about that? All right, okay, everyone. I have a resolution regarding a recommendation report for Bill 139. Do I have a mover for this one? Brian, go ahead. Yes, thank you. Okay. Resolved that report GH 2319, new regulations under the Ontario Heritage Act, Bill 139 be received, and that the response to the Ministry of Citizenship and Multiculturalism questions within this report and those added by the committee be shared with the province to aid in their community engagement discussions. All in favor? Fantastic. Thanks, everyone. Okay, we're moving along with our report section to our first designation research report of this evening. First up is for 7 Kerman Avenue, and Garrett will be delivering this report. Thanks, Garrett.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I haven't spoken in an hour, but which is all right. Yeah, I was just going to give a quick update here. So last month we had the designations at 127 Main Street West, 92 Main Street West, and 360 Main Street West. So since then we've met with the Grimsby Historical Society and Wayne Mullins, and he's given us some kind of feedback and some more information on the reports, and I've also met with some of the homeowners as well. So we've just learned some interesting information I thought I'd share with the group tonight. So for 360 Main Street West, that was the property designed by Wolverton Daverman Architects from Detroit for Harold Corwin Wolverton and his wife. So after speaking with Wayne, some new information was that the Wolvertons actually had quite an expansive farming operation in Redland, California, which was instrumental in the development of Sunkist brand, which was very cool. So we wanted to add that into the report as well. Wayne also believes that the reason they had such a strong tie with the States is probably why they hired an American firm to design their house in Grimsby here as well. Harold and his wife also went on to have a daughter. Don't know her name right now, but she was one of the first female engineers in North America and was instrumental in designing the roadwork system in Chicago and other major cities in the States as well. So we have quite a bit of information on her that I wanted to add into that report as well. And for the property at 127 Main Street West, I've met with the property owners and they're supportive of the designation. And they're going to send me over a couple more documents just verifying some of this info. But some of the cool facts were the building was built partially from rejected ship beams or beams that were salvaged from ships. I saw some of them today, which was pretty interesting, actually. And based on some of the joinery in the house as well, Heritage Architects have come into the property and been able to tell that it was partially or fully assembled by ship carpenters, which was really interesting. And I know it's been told that the building was constructed in 1808, but now it's believed it was possibly built in 1794 and was supporting the Nels grist mill on Gibson Avenue. And it was later rolled down to be the merchant shop on the Nels property on Main Street West. And the blood stain on the interior does exist from when it was a butcher shop and, you know, they were hunting wild game. So I thought that was really interesting. I wanted to share it. The property at 92 Main Street West, I'm meeting with the property owner in about a month. So hopefully I'll have some more information on that one as well. I'll just share my PowerPoint here. So I would again like to note that all property owners have been given notice twice of the proposed designation of their properties, and staff are working collectively with property owners to address any questions or concerns they may have. And I also wanted to thank again the Grimsby Historical Society for their contributions and Wayne Mullins, and he's also done research through his company Legacy Research for us. So now I'll get into 7 Kerman. Based on the assessment of cultural heritage value or interest, staff recommend that the property at 7 Kerman Avenue be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Staff have concluded that the property has met 4 out of 9 prescribed criteria of the Ontario Regulation 906. So the property meets the criteria for design and physical value because the house at 7 Kerman Avenue was built in 1893 by John Kerman. The house is 2.5 stories tall, built in the shingle Queen Anne architectural style, which is not commonly found within Grimsby. And kind of from the name, you can see that the exterior of the building is typically completely clad in wooden shingles. The property meets the criteria for historical and associative value because the structure at 7 Kerman has direct associations with John Kerman and Reverend Dr. Neil Leckie. John Kerman was a well-known and much-respected Grimsby resident. He started the first greenhouses within Grimsby with a specialty in roses. And kind of a fun fact, I remember at a previous meeting, we brought 25 Kerman Avenue forward, and I was asked, why does the property have the name Melrose Gardens? So John Kerman, who was known for his rose gardens, eventually later on moved into 25 Kerman. So I believe that's where that namesake came from. And I wanted to add on too, so Reverend Dr. Neil Leckie and his wife Adelaide lived at 7 Kerman, and they had held many social events at the house, including the annual gathering of the United Empire Loyalist Association of St. Catharines. And the property meets the criteria for contextual value because the structure at 7 Kerman Avenue contributes to the streetscape and shows the growing wealth of John Kerman, who contributed to Grimsby's horticultural success. The structure is a unique house along Kerman Avenue and provides an understanding of how the street evolved over time. Based on the assessment of cultural heritage value or interest and significant findings, staff recommend that the property at 7 Kerman Avenue be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Garrett. And I'm really glad to hear that you're still speaking with heritage property owners from from last month's meeting as well. So it's really cool that we have new information to share. Do we have any questions from the committee regarding 7 Kerman Avenue? I have a couple questions. Some just more clarity, I think. So on page 9 in figure 3, it's of the map, the 1862 map. I just wanted to clarify, if the landowner was Dennis Nixon or Alan Nixon, because in the caption says Alan Nixon. And I just wanted to clarify like what came first and then also the dots, like what you circled, is that gray dot, is that what you put there, or is that the house from, if you know what I mean? Just clarifying the map would be wonderful. Oh, yeah, sorry, page 9, figure 3.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yeah, so looking at the map, I will assume it was Dennis Nixon's property in 1862.
You know how like land deeds are different, so I just...
Sorry, just if I can clarify, because Alan Nixon was the founder of the stone shop, and Alan Nixon died of cholera in 1813, he and his wife. So Dennis was younger, and Dennis was William Nixon, who built our house up on Ridge, was the son of Alan Nixon and took over the blacksmith shop, the old stone shop, in 1813 when his parents succumbed to cholera. So Dennis was Nixon Hall. That's the relationship there. But there may have been a second Alan Nixon too. That's what makes it difficult when we're talking 200 years.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm getting confused. All the names are also similar around this time. So anyway, I just wanted to clarify, and then also clarifying the location of the dot.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yeah, so that dot is the approximate location of where the dwelling was built. So I think the one, because 7 Kerman is quite close to Main Street West and the concession line there. But I believe the building in that circle is most likely Nixon Hall. But 7 Kerman is within that vicinity. It just hadn't been built yet. Thank you.
Okay, so that gray dot I'm seeing was added by like us, by like by you. That little gray dot.
Yeah.
The tribunal, you know, the historical atlas maps.
Mm-hmm.
It pops in.
Okay. Bianca's telling me that when on the mapping software we use, I think it's Ontario maps or something.
Ontario Historical County Maps.
Ontario Historical County Maps. Atlas. They place that pin on the map.
I
So
understand.
I see why it looks like it's highlighting a structure, and I can make that clearer in the figure description as well.
It might just be me because I get like kind of like nerdy about maps, and I'm like, what is this dot? Is this real? Like, but
If it's confusing, I'll correct it for sure. Thank you.
Well, thank you for clarifying the Nixon lineage also. Maybe that could be clarified in here also. Okay. I have one other comment, if no one else has any. For the evaluations and the assessments, when it comes to the contextual value at like 7.4, I think, could we make an argument that contextually that side of Kerman Avenue like does have historical value? Like all of the houses, most of the houses on that street are like of historical value in some way. And when we reviewed 25 Kerman Avenue, I remember you speaking on that the HG&B tracks went down Kerman Avenue to connect up from Main Street west to Livingston. So like that does seem to be like kind of like a cool cultural heritage landscape for the area. So is that something that we can like start to talk about and maybe add to these reports when we talk about Kerman? Like there does seem to be a continuity with the heritage on that street that's connected. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that, or the committee, or I don't know, something I just wanted to bring up.
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chair. Within our Grimsby Special Places Cultural Heritage Landscape document, it's within here in the one of the first sections explaining the context of the area. It does expand on Kerman Avenue and kind of how that area developed and the role that HG&B played. But I can definitely include that into the contextual value of the 906.
Yeah. Again, like I think it would just be kind of nice to put it in the actual designation, like especially after our conversation earlier about what might be missing from designations later on, how we can maybe form that a little, I guess, formalize that that cultural, contextual value a little bit more. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Thank you, Garrett, for presenting the report on 7 Kerman Avenue. Do I have a mover for that report? Councillor Cristangi, thank you. Resolved that 7 Kerman Avenue be designated under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and that a notice of intention to designate be issued in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, next up, Garrett will be presenting a designation research report for 19 Mountain Street. Go ahead, Garrett.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Based on the assessment of cultural heritage value or interest, staff recommend that the property at 19 Mountain Street be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Staff have concluded that the property has met 7 out of 9 prescribed criteria of the Ontario Regulation 906. So the property meets the criteria for design and physical value because 19 Mountain Street is representative of the East Lake stick style. The East Lake and stick styles share many similarities and were both popular during the Victorian period. The East Lake movement was started by Charles Eastlake, and his designs gained popularity in the mid-19th century and were commonly used on exterior ornamentation and furniture. Just looking at the pic here as well, you can see like up in the gables of the building, the half timbering effect, the heavy porch columns, the perforated designs, and like the bracketing. That's all very signature Charles Eastlake style. So we're really fortunate to have a building that features those in Grimsby. The property meets the criteria for historical and associative value. I'm kind of doing this a bit out of order of operations here. When I go into 23 Mountain, I'm speaking about the son's house first, then I'll speak about the father's. But the property at 19 Mountain Street has direct associations with the Grout family, St. Andrew's Church, and the Grout Foundry, which was located on the adjacent corner. The house here was occupied by Kenneth Grout, and he worked at his father's foundry, and that's where they developed the sulky plow. And the property meets the criteria for contextual value because 19 Mountain Street supports the character of the area along the Mountain Street corridor. While the Grout Foundry itself does not exist anymore, the house along with his father's house at 23 Mountain Street both remain, showing the remnants of the supportive housing for the Grout family and their foundry business. The East Lake stick-style structure at the corner of Mountain and Elm Street is a gateway building in Grimsby's downtown core since the mid-1800s. Based on the assessment of cultural heritage value or interest, staff recommend that the property at 19 Mountain Street be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Garrett. Any questions or comments from the committee? I think the architecture of this building is so cool. And even like, I pass by this building all the time, but on the Google Map zooms that you have, you really show the detail of like the craftsmanship. So wow, that's really cool. I'm excited to see this one being put forward for designation. That's really awesome. That's all I had. I just wanted to say that. Anything else? Okay, awesome. Okay, so then we have a resolution for 19 Mountain Street. Do I have a mover for okay, Mayor Jordan, thank you.
I don't think he can move it because he's ex officio.
Oh, Mayor Jordan, I don't think you can move it. Oh man, I'm sorry. I was so excited. I just wanted to have you be a part of it. We're just happy you're here. Councillor DeFlavio, thank you. Or did you have a question? Oh, okay, thank you. I put you down.
Yeah. I'll put it in a minute.
Mayor Jordan tried to be struck down by the chair. Spirits crushed by the chair.
Thank you, Councilor DeFlavio. All right, resolved that 19 Mountain Street be designated under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and then a notice of intention to designate be issued in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act. All in favor? Fantastic, thank you. All right, next up, our last designation report for the evening, just moving up the street a little bit to 23 Mountain Street. Go ahead, Garrett.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Based on the assessment of cultural heritage value or interest, staff recommend that the property at 23 Mountain Street be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Staff have concluded that the property has met 4 out of 9 prescribed criteria of the Ontario Regulation 906. The property meets the criteria for design and physical value because 23 Mountain Street is representative of the Italianate architectural style. The structure was unique to Ontario in the mid-1850s. The style was promoted by the Canada Farmer Journal in 1865, 10 years after the construction of the dwelling. This residence provided a classical and symmetrical alternative to the Gothic cottage. The property meets the criteria for historical and associative value because 23 Mountain Street has direct associations with the Grout family. The Reverend Grout was the third minister to St. Andrew's Church and was widely loved and respected within the community. John Henry Grout is the third son of Reverend Grout and his wife Eliza. He was born in 1834 and married Jane Nels. John established the Grout Agricultural Works in 1856, and he built the house here at 23 Mountain Street. The property meets the criteria for contextual value because this dwelling is a strong example of what affluent and early housing for wealthy tradesmen would have looked like within the town of Grimsby. And the structure provides a greater understanding of how the area looked at the height of the industry, which was located down the street. Based on the assessment of cultural heritage value or interest and significant findings, staff recommend that the property at 23 Mountain Street be designated under Part 4 of the Ontario Heritage Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Garrett. Any questions or comments from the committee? Awesome. I think this is an interesting one. It has significant history, and the significant industrialist of the town lived here and built the house. And yet it's kind of a shame that we don't have as many sources as we would have liked to know fully about the house. Like, we don't have a date, for example, of when the house was built. Is that like a lack in the land deeds? Were things missing in the land registry?
Through you, Chair. I believe it is in the report, if not all included, 1855. So 10 years before that Italianate style was popular. So it's kind of interesting that that style reached Grimsby before it was peaking.
Do you think it was just, that was added on, those features? Later on, the house was built and those features were added on?
Please repeat his question because Mike's on.
Yeah, through you, Chair. I'll just repeat Councillor DeFlavio's question. Do we believe that the Italianate features were added onto the property? We have discussed this internally before. It's kind of a simplified Italianate, but it does carry kind of that Georgian neoclassical form with the symmetrical 3-bay low-sloped roof. Personally, I do believe it was constructed to look like this. Thank you.
That's really interesting. Okay. I don't know, maybe I missed it in the report, but I'm not sure if the age of the building is in it explicitly. So I wonder if we want to, just for general knowledge, especially because that's knowing the age of the report, and then also that whole, what you just mentioned about the Italianate style coming in a little bit later. I think that's quite interesting, and gives the building itself a little bit more unique story to it. Okay, I'm just going through my questions here. Just one second.
Feels more like Italian.
Light. Okay, then I think that answers my questions, because I know you mentioned a couple times in the report, like just lack of sources. Is that just like the land deeds we're missing?
Through you, Chair, we were missing some of the on-land pages, but we haven't received feedback, or I haven't reached out to Wayne about this particular property yet, so I'm sure he'll be able to clear up some of that for us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I was just more curious in sources regarding it. Again, because, the Grout Foundry was a significant, industrial business in Grimsby. So it's interesting that we have his house, and I didn't even know that's where he lived until I read the report. So that's really neat. And knowing that it's so close to where the first foundry was is really interesting also. So thank you for putting this forward and sharing those stories. That's really great. Any other questions?
I know David McConnell, the owner, I wonder if he has any.
That would be awesome.
Please do.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Yes, Amy, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, the chair. What struck me with this one is just when you look at the picture, and I think I spoke about this earlier with some of you, when you look at the picture in figure 12, even though they're very small characteristic changes that are made, whether that be the paint or, the removal of the shutters, the adjustment to the portico, it really has a dramatic impact on the architectural style of the house, even though the main features of the house have not been altered. And I just, for me, it's just one more important figure that although we do blending and we make the adjustment and the bridging of the gap of old and new, when we talk about features such as windows and, sometimes it looks like we're getting into the nitty gritty of changes and approvals and stuff, how important and the impact they can have on the home. Because to me, it's a different house aesthetically today than it was in figure 12. So I just think it's important that we, sometimes we don't be hard on ourselves when we get into the nitty gritty, but they're important aspects that we need to maintain.
Thank you. I think that's a good point to bring up. Any final comments from the committee? Okay. Okay, we'll go to the resolution then for the designation research report for 23 Mountain Street. I'll need a mover. Brian, go. Thank you. Okay, resolved that 23 Mountain Street be designated under Part 4, Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act, and then a notice of intention to designate be issued in accordance with the Ontario Heritage Act. All in favor? Perfect, thank you. All right, we are moving forward with the announcements portion of our agenda this evening. And we have an announcement from Bianca regarding Willowbank.
Thank you, through the chair. I just wanted to share with the committee this exciting write-up that was done inside the Willowbank newsletter featuring the town of Grimsby and the partnership that we have with the Willowbank. So for anyone who doesn't know, Willowbank is Canada's premier conservation school, and we have a partnership with them for heritage planning and designation. So it's really exciting for the municipality to be involved with the school. And then this opportunity also facilitates an opportunity for the students to get real world experience. So we work with the students, and together we produce designation research reports. Of the 9 that have been done with them, actually I think it's actually 10. 6 of them have been officially designated, and then 4 more we worked with them this fall, and those will be coming in January. And those 4 reports are really amazing. I'm really looking forward to you guys seeing them. They have fantastic stories, so looking forward to bringing that to the committee. And I just wanted to share this article with all of you. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you, Bianca. I do have a resolution for this. Can Can I have a mover for this? Thank you, Councillor DeFlavio. All right, resolved that the Town of Grimsby Partnership Willowbank newsletter be received. All in favor? Thank you. Okay. Awesome. And I just had one other announcement I wanted to share regarding last month's. If you'll remember, at the committee last month, we had the Legion came forward requesting that we change the name of Clark Street, or part of Clark Street, to Veterans Way, to honor the veterans, and that was approved by council. So it is now going forward. A recommendation report will be prepared by the town staff and move forward to the region of Niagara for consideration. And since then, the Grimsby Historical Society, Wayne Mullins, contacted us saying that they've received more information and gathered a little bit more information about the Clark family for us to kind of learn more about them. And it sounds like William Clark was quite instrumental in the community in like the mid 1800s. I was involved with the Fenian raids, which isn't known much to Grimsby or to Niagara, really. We don't really have a lot of tangible evidence, not a lot of written records about the Fenian raids, but it sounds like Clark might have participated in the raids and was instrumental in getting some acknowledgement to the people who fought in the raids. So that's really instrumental. And so knowing that, having this information come to us, we're working with the Grimsby Historical Society to kind of include a little bit of the history of Clark, the Clark family, in a recommendation report, in the hopes that what we can do with that street is to honor both the veterans for the Legion, but also the Clark family, because it is a really interesting history. William Clark was also, a longstanding council member for the town at the time. So I think it would be really cool to honor both stories. And again, we don't have a lot of Fenian history here, and we know what happened and we know it was significant. So it'd be really cool to share that. Councillor DeFlavio, yes, go ahead.
I was just going to suggest that Wayne's email be included as correspondence. Take out the email addresses and stuff, but the information that was provided was good and it was pertinent to what we've talked about before. So I think including it as correspondence in the Heritage Minutes would be a good idea, if that's something we could do.
Through the chair, I was just going to add, just for clarification, because I know you said it was approved, I just wanted to be clear that the resolution that went forward to from Heritage Committee, the minutes themselves were received and approved by council, but the actual changing of the street name, they have taken that feedback recommendation from the committee, but a full recommendation report from staff will be brought to council, and council will be making a recommendation to the Niagara region. Ultimately, the Niagara region will be deciding if the name is changed or not, but I just wanted to confirm that hasn't been approved. Nothing's happening just yet. We're still in the due diligence phase of the recommendation step. Thanks.
Thank you for that clarification, Bianca. Okay, yes. But the new information that we've gotten will be included in that recommendation report.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Okay, well, I guess with that then we'll conclude this evening's meeting. Thank you everyone so much for all of your input, and have a really great night, and we'll see you next month.